The day I graduated was really quite exciting for me. I finally felt this was finished, and now I could do what I'd wanted to do since the time I was about 7 years old. So I had the official piece of paper in my hand, and it was a wonderful feeling.
She just epitomized for me what nursing is all about, going beyond the call of duty to do something for someone who otherwise would have no one with them. And so every time I think of nursing and think about why I'm here, it's Gita Proudman that I think of.
It gives me great honor, and it is indeed a privilege to introduce a young woman to you who, to me, has become a symbol of what ONA is.
On June 12th of 1998, I went in for a regular 8-hour night shift in the labor and delivery department, and I didn't know it at the time, but that shift would change my life forever, quite dramatically. The baby that died, I had thankfully, prior to that, never seen an infant who looked like him, and don't really need to see it again. He had massive deformities, facial deformities. He had, where his mouth was supposed to be, was basically a hole in his face, and his nose was displaced, his eyes were displaced, his brain was for the most part outside his skull. And he was dying, and he was being left alone to die. And it was very busy, and people didn't have time to spend time with him, and I knew that he was going to, in all likelihood, die, and no one would realize it for an hour because they would have checked on him, he would have been breathing, and then he would stop and no one would know for the longest time. And that was him in a nutshell. He was a dying, deformed infant that nobody wanted to look at. But because the nursery was so busy, he wasn't getting much comforting. The mother, I had been told, had said her goodbyes at Sick Kids and was not going to be coming in. And I was also told that this baby was not expected to survive our shift. I just thought that the child deserved some human contact before he died. And what the history I had been given, he hadn't had any. I found out later that wasn't exactly true, but that was what prompted me to pick him up. I decided that when I had the opportunity to take a break, I was going to use it to hold him. I was able to take a break about 40 minutes later, and I asked permission from the nurse who was covering the nursery at the time if I could, and she said absolutely, it's a good idea, no one has the time to hold him, so, you know, by all means. And she suggested I take him into the doctor's sleep room, which was away from other mothers and away from the nursery, and gave some dignity to the baby. And I sat with him in that room it was approximately an hour, and during the last 15 minutes he really started to slow down, and his breathing slowed dramatically. And finally it stopped, and I did not, because he had a do not resuscitate order, I did nothing. I waited a few minutes and I checked his chest and he was gone. You know, during the time I was holding him, I would sing to him a little bit and talk to him a bit and just let him know somebody was there. And again, I don't know how much difference it made to him. I hope it made some difference. After he passed away, I went and got his nurse who had returned from her break, and we checked him together, and then she called the emergency physician, and I went back to work. And I told the other staff who were around, who were interested, that he had passed away, and they all told me that they had thought I had done a good thing by holding him. And then I ran into another nurse in the hallway, very briefly, about 30-second conversation that I don't remember word for word. But I did tell her that he had died peacefully in my arms, and I'd felt I'd helped him. And she didn't say anything strange. She simply said something like, "Oh, good," or "That's good, I'm glad," or whatever, and we went back to work and saw each other quite a few times the rest of the morning, and she never said a word to me that indicated she had had a problem with something I'd said. From there, I went home and went to bed. It had been a stressful night for me, and I knew I had to go back to work later that afternoon. After I got up, I went out to run some errands, and when I came back, standing in my lobby were the manager from our other side of the hospital, who had at one time been my manager, but she had moved to the other site, and a woman that I didn't recognize. I assumed they were there to see somebody else. I didn't know why, but I just assumed that. So I said hello and continued into the building and was very surprised that they followed me in. And the manager said to me, "Gita, we'd like to talk to you about the death of the baby." Now, I was still extremely naive, and I thought, oh, somebody said that I was upset, and they're just checking up on me, and they're just, you know, doing some nice follow-up because they're so concerned about me. Little did I know that that was not the case. I invited them into my apartment, and we sat down, and they asked me to tell them what had happened, so I did, and they wouldn't look at me. They kept looking back and forth at each other, and finally I said, what is going on here? There's something you're not telling me. And they danced around it and wouldn't answer, and finally one said, well, a concern has been raised that foul play was involved in this baby's death. Now, I nearly slid off my chair and hit the floor at that point because I couldn't believe that this was happening. I thought, okay, I said, there's some kind of mistake here. I don't know what has happened or what's been said, or, you know. And they said, well, you know, one of the nurses raised a concern. Do you remember what you might have said to anybody? Do you remember your conversations? I said, how would I don't remember what I said. Then they proceeded to tell me that I was suspended and that they would conduct a very thorough internal investigation prior to calling the coroner, and that they would wait with me until my husband came home because I was so distressed. And I said, no, I'd really rather that you go and conduct your investigation, speak to the other staff who were on, because they'll tell you that they checked on me and everything was fine, and we can put this to rest. Well, they either talked really fast or didn't talk to anybody at all, which I know the latter is the case, because 45 minutes later I got a call saying that the coroner was now involved. The police came on the Monday. The baby died on a Friday. They came over on a Monday and asked if they could, you know, talk to me. I said absolutely. And I talked to them for an hour and a half, and it wasn't, I mean, they made me go through it 4 or 5 times, but it wasn't antagonistic, it wasn't threatening. So when they said, if we have any more questions, can we call you? I said, sure. They also interviewed my husband that day and asked him some very bizarre questions, but we still both felt okay. We still felt, well, now we've told them our story and we've told them the truth, and there's nothing that we have to worry about. And following my interview, the day after that, my union rep called me and asked me what was going on, and that was the first time the union became involved. Management had not informed them that there had been an allegation raised, so she was very surprised and very concerned, and she said, well, I'm going to put you in touch with ONA Central and the legal team there, and they'll put you in touch with a lawyer, and you'll be able to, you know. And I told her, well, I don't need a lawyer. I haven't done anything wrong. I'm innocent. And it's just going to make me look guilty, so, you know, I really don't need one. And she laughed at me and said, well, I'm giving you the phone numbers anyway, and I want to make sure that you call. In the meantime, the police had called and said, Gita, we have a few more questions. Would you please come in? And I said, well, my union rep has recommended to me that I bring a lawyer. And then he said the one thing that stopped me from doing it. He said, well, do you think you need a lawyer? So Gita said, no, I don't need one. And on the Thursday morning, I went in and spent 6 hours in an interrogation room with 2 men all day long. And it culminated, they lied to me that day. They told me the baby had died of asphyxia. And I had no idea how that was possible. I didn't think that made any sense. And they told me at the end of the day, Gita, we're going to get the truth out of you somehow. And I said, well, there's no other truth to get because I've told you everything that I can say. They actually let me go home that day. I didn't think they would. I called a lawyer. that afternoon and didn't stop till I found him. And we met, and when I said to him, well, they're just looking for the truth, aren't they? He laughed at me.
I felt very much as Gita did at the beginning about the truth and innocence, and that she was innocent, and that we were both naive, essentially, and I believed quite strongly that yes, she was innocent, and that we didn't need a lawyer. She should speak the truth as she saw it, and everything would come out in the wash. And that did not change until the second interview with the police that Gita underwent, that was 6 hours long. And that just made me angry, and I realized then that the police were not looking for the truth. They were looking to prove what they believed was the truth, and of course they were wrong.
And he said, you know, I don't understand why you haven't been charged yet. I said, excuse me? Because it was in the process of these interviews that I had found out that the nurse that was so concerned about me was the one that had said, I told her I did it. I put my hand over his mouth so he couldn't take another breath, and he didn't struggle.
For about 2.5 weeks, I heard nothing. I didn't know what was going on. I was sitting at home, you know, wondering what was happening. And my attorney kept trying to find out, and was being told that the investigation was ongoing, and, you know, when they had decided something, they'd let him know. And on July 6th, they turned up at my door with a warrant for my arrest, saying they were charging me with second-degree murder in the death of this baby.
I didn't know what had happened until she didn't arrive to pick me up from this exam downtown. In fact, I called home, got an answer on our answering machine, or a message from her, as the police officers were in our apartment, and she was crying and saying that they were arresting her. So I did not see her at the apartment when they came to arrest her. I found out by a phone message. I had to take a cab home that day, beside myself, trying to understand how this, you know, how it could have gotten this far. And then we just set the ball rolling as best we could, not really knowing much about the legal system, and looking for help wherever we could find it.
The next days after that are really quite blurry for me. I don't remember a lot of it. It was, they took me to the West Detention Center, and I spent 9 days there. You know, with one court appearance on it the day after I was charged, and it was horrible. It was just horrifying. I had never even imagined this was possible.
I guess my recollection of what happened with Gita was getting a call one Sunday afternoon when I was in the office from the local president, who was distraught over what had just happened to this young woman who I didn't know or knew nothing about her.
As the story started to unfold, I realized this is a young nurse who has barely graduated, who's in a situation that's very difficult. As nurses, we all face death and dying on a regular basis. However, when we do, we know that we always will do the best we can for our patients. And to find out that this young woman who was faced with this difficult situation early in her profession was then on top of that charged with murder, it was unthinkable to us. And we wanted to rush out there and give her support as a profession, as a union, and as fellow nurses. We have in the Ontario Nurses Association a plan called LEAP, which is a Legal Expenses Assistance Plan. And that plan has a number of modifications and conditions on it, but basically it exists to protect nurses in their professional practice, both at the College of Nurses and in the unusual event that they should be criminally charged.
I was arrested on a Monday, and on the Wednesday I met the woman who would become my attorney, Marlis Edward. And she gave me a lot more confidence than I had by then. By then I felt really slammed by the system. I felt stuck and trapped, and that I wasn't going to be able to extricate myself from this hole. And she gave me a lot more confidence that I would be able to.
Visiting Gita in jail was probably something I hope most people never get to experience, and it was something I never thought I would experience. It's horrendous. You really don't have a lot of access at all. You're very regimented as to when you can visit, and I think during the 9 days that she was in, I only saw her twice. And you see the person through 2 inches of plexiglass, and you speak to them on a phone, which you can hardly hear. And I could tell she was very upset, and it was devastating not to be able to hug her and to comfort her. And but that was out of the question. There was no way that was going to happen, and it's distressing in a society where you're presumed innocent until proven guilty.
I was arrested on July 6th, and on July 14th I had a bail hearing, and my bail was not contested by the Crown. They didn't deem me a threat to society. So. And when I went to that bail hearing, I walked in the courtroom and it was jammed, and it wasn't jammed with reporters. The reporters were all shoved off to one side, and the rest of the seats were full of my family and my friends and my coworkers and nurses from ONA and from the RNAO who I had never seen before and who had never seen me before, but they were there because they thought something was wrong. And that was when I started to feel better. I thought, okay, you know, maybe we can get out of this. I've got all these people standing behind me. I think we can do this. And it was challenging even going into that room. I had to walk in with handcuffs on and listen to my family and friends gasp as they took them off and put them back on at the end, which was very distressing for everybody. But at the end of that day, I did get to go home.
I had the good fortune to have many people call me, including representatives from both ONA and the RNAO. And they were all very supportive and tried to give me as much support as possible so that I could get through this, and also to help me contact those people that would be able to help Gita the most.
And my first recollection of Gita was this frail young woman and her poise and her professionalism, which just blew me away. And every time we went back, I saw a young woman who was committed to the profession of nursing and to caring for people, and thought so much about them that she put herself in jeopardy as a result of that.
I hated being kept from being a frontline nurse. I hated not being able to be with the patients and do what I was good at and what I felt I had been destined to do. It was very distressing for me. You know, I was keeping in contact with my coworkers, and I thrived on hearing their stories, even if they were, you know, well, we had such an insane day today and nobody got a break, and I envied them. I wanted to be there, you know, complaining about not getting a break for lunch. But I really, really missed it. I really missed it. I put my uniforms way out of sight so I wouldn't even have to see them, but I really missed being a nurse. On November 9th of '99, the charge against me was finally withdrawn. It had been a long process to get it withdrawn. Numerous court appearances, a preliminary inquiry that sent my case to trial. Really, it was the tenacity of Marlis that got these charges withdrawn. She insisted on a Crown review of this case, and she had told me that if ever she had seen a case that should not go to trial, this was the one. And she was going to do everything in her power to prevent it from happening.
We knew that this was likely to happen, so along with other nurses groups, we went to the courthouse, and the picture was presented and the charge was withdrawn. And needless to say, people were ecstatic. We went outside and threw up our arms in joy and hugged and kissed and danced around, and it was the best news that we had heard. And all of the nurses around Ontario cheered with us. Many had been aware of what was going on. They'd sent cards, they'd sent messages of sympathy. And we were thrilled to have all the media there for this moment, because that was the moment that we wanted to share with the public, that there's no way that this happened. This is a wonderful young woman, a wonderful nurse. We hope she continues in her profession, and we want to give her all the support we can.
Barb Wall and Doris Grinspoon, who's the executive director at RNAO, were dancing with my father in the street, which made it to the news, which he still talks about. And it was amazing. So many powerful people in nursing standing there with me and my coworkers and with my family. Everybody was just so happy and so relieved that this was finished. It was just, it was incredible. It was a proud day. It was a proud day for me as a person, but also for me as a nurse, to see everybody standing together.
It's so easy for this to happen to anybody. Maybe not to the same extent, but accusations can come from anywhere at any time. And to have the support and backup of your union to help you get through it is exactly what you need to have, because we are vulnerable. And I know I'm not the only person who at the beginning wouldn't have called a lawyer. I know I'm not. We trust too much. And perhaps now that won't happen anymore. I'm not saying, I wouldn't do anything too differently. Would I take him to an isolated room again? No. No, I wouldn't. And in a way, that's very sad, because people should be allowed to die with dignity and not having people stare at them.
My view of ONA has really changed. When the part-time and casual nurses at Humber became unionized, I was angry. I was really angry. I did not want to lose $50 a month, and I didn't understand why I had to, because I didn't see any point to nurses having a union. I didn't understand why we needed one. I thought, well, you know, we're healthcare workers, this is our job, this is what we do. You guys are just making it difficult, you're making relations with the employer difficult, and I don't like it, and I don't want to be part of it. And I didn't like that I didn't have a choice. I don't begrudge that $50 anymore. It's the support you can get from them is just, you can't measure it. It's amazing. And if you need help, they're there. They're there for you. They do so much that we don't know about. And part of that is part of the problem. We don't know what they're doing behind the scenes, and they're trying to make a safer and better work environment for all of us, and we don't realize that. Nurses don't want to be part of a union. We don't want to be seen as the dock worker walking up and down with a sign, but we do need people protecting our rights and our safety and our practice, and ONA does that. And I never realized that before. And now I want to make sure that everybody realizes it.
I feel very proud of what ONA was able to do for Gita. I think this is a concrete example of the importance of having a union to support nurses, and it's a concrete example of how effective we can be. Unfortunately, there are other examples which took place at almost the same time where nurses who were not unionized didn't have that support. And certainly in a difficult time like this, that support is critical. We put this legal assistance plan in place many, many years ago, and it's been called on, unfortunately, a number of times, and we're glad that we have it there. A few years ago, at the annual meeting, our nurses took a vote to increase the support for each member who might be charged in such a way, to increase to $300,000 per case. I'm proud of that, because we needed that amount of support, and we're glad we were able to give it.
They didn't doubt me for a second. None of these people had ever set eyes on me before. They didn't know anything about me, and they still did all of this for me. They just knew that there was something wrong, and I didn't have to prove anything to them for them to do what they did. And that's just amazing. You couldn't ask for anything more. You really couldn't. I wasn't even asking for what I got. It was just offered. It was just offered, and that's the kind of union that they are. That's the kind of group of people that they are. It's just I can't say enough about them. I don't know what we would have done without them. I really don't. I don't know what we would have done without them.
Thank you so much. It's really nice. I'm proud of you. Really, very proud. We're proud of you.
This young woman was doing what is the essence of nursing, which is holding people, comforting them, caring for them. And we will probably never forgive the system for doing that. And what we want to do is make sure this kind of thing never happens again.
I'm back doing what I'm supposed to be doing and what I love to do. And it's the best feeling in the world. I love it.